The courthouse smelled like old wood and broken promises, and I could taste the metallic tang of my own fear as I watched Aunt Linda smooth her navy dress with hands that had once braided my hair. She sat 3 rows ahead of me, her silver wedding ring catching the fluorescent light as she adjusted the manila folder in her lap, the same folder I'd seen her organizing at her kitchen table for weeks, muttering numbers under her breath like some twisted prayer. The bailiff's voice cut through the morning stillness. Case number 2024, CV 8847, Harrison versus Harrison, regarding financial restitution for guardianship services. My stomach dropped. Financial restitution. The words felt like ice water in my veins. I'd known this day was coming ever since Linda cornered me at Mom's grave 6 months ago, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes calculating as she mentioned all the sacrifices she'd made. But sitting here now, watching her rise with that folder clutched against her chest like armor, I realized I'd been naive to think family meant anything more than dollar signs to her. Judge Martinez looked tired already, and it wasn't even 9 a.m. His reading glasses perched on the end of his nose as he shuffled through papers, the sound crisp and final in the hushed courtroom. Ms. Linda Harrison, you're representing yourself today? Yes, Your Honor. Linda's voice carried that same tone she'd used when she told 8-year-old me that crying wouldn't bring Mommy back. Practical, efficient, cold. And, Ms. Kate Harrison, I see you also have no legal representation. I stood on shaking legs, my voice barely above a whisper. That's correct, Your Honor. The judge nodded, making a note. Ms. Linda Harrison, please present your case. Linda opened her folder with theatrical precision, pulling out a single sheet of paper that she held up like evidence of a crime. Your Honor, I'm here today to collect on 18 years of unpaid childcare services. When my sister died in that car accident, I took in her daughter without question, without compensation, and without any help from the state or family. The words hit me like physical blows. Unpaid childcare services. As if every scraped knee she'd bandaged, every school play she'd attended, every birthday cake she'd baked had been nothing more than billable hours. I've calculated the fair market value of round-the-clock childcare, housing, food, clothing, medical expenses, and educational support. She walked toward the judge's bench, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown timer. The total comes to $50,000. The courtroom felt like it was spinning. I gripped the wooden rail in front of me, my knuckles white against the dark wood. $50,000. The number echoed in my head, drowning out everything else. Judge Martinez took the paper, his expression unreadable as he scanned the contents. The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap, broken only by the distant hum of the air conditioning and the scratch of the court reporter's fingers on her machine. Ms. Linda Harrison, the judge said finally, his voice carrying a weight that made my aunt's confident posture falter slightly. This is quite detailed. Thank you, Your Honor. I believe in being thorough. Indeed. He set the paper down and leaned back in his chair, studying Linda with the kind of look that made seasoned lawyers nervous. Tell me, during the time you were caring for Ms. Kate Harrison, did you receive any government assistance on her behalf? The question hung in the air like smoke. I watched Linda's face, saw the tiny muscle in her jaw twitch, the same tell she'd had since we were kids, the one that meant she was about to lie. Well, there were some small benefits, but they hardly covered Social Security, survivor benefits. Judge Martinez interrupted, his tone sharp enough to cut glass. Linda's face went pale. Your Honor, I don't see how that's relevant to. Answer the question, please. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat, could smell the fierce sweat that had started to bead on Linda's forehead despite the courthouse's aggressive air conditioning. Yes, she whispered. There were Social Security benefits. Judge Martinez picked up another set of papers from his desk, papers I hadn't seen before, papers that made Linda take an involuntary step backward. According to the Social Security Administration records I requested yesterday, he said, his voice carrying across the courtroom like thunder, you received $1,200 per month in survivor benefits for Ms. Kate Harrison from the time she was 8 years old until she turned 18. That's $144,000 over 12 years. My legs gave out. I sank into the wooden pew behind me, the math spinning in my head like a slot machine. $144,000. Money that was supposed to be for me, for my care, for my future. But that's not all, Judge Martinez continued, and I watched Linda's face crumble like a house of cards. There were also additional benefits for educational expenses and cost of living adjustments. The total amount you received on behalf of Ms. Kate Harrison was $190,000. The entire courtroom went silent. I stared at the back of Linda's head, watching her shoulders shake as the weight of 18 years of lies came crashing down around her. $190,000. Nearly $200,000 that she'd collected in my name while making me feel guilty for every meal I ate, every pair of shoes I needed, every school supply that cost more than a few dollars. Ms. Linda Harrison, Judge Martinez said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Would you care to explain to this court why you're demanding $50,000 from your niece when you've already received $190,000 in government benefits specifically designated for her care? Linda turned around then, her eyes finding mine across the courtroom. For just a moment, I saw something that might have been shame flicker across her face. But then her expression hardened, and I realized with crystal clarity that she wasn't done fighting. She opened her mouth to speak, but before any words could come out, the courtroom doors burst open with a bang that made everyone jump. A man in an expensive suit strode in, briefcase in hand, his eyes locked on Linda with the intensity of a predator who'd finally cornered his prey. "Your Honor," he called out, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never lost a case. "I apologize for the interruption, but I have evidence that will fundamentally change the nature of this proceeding." The man's footsteps echoed through the stunned courtroom like gunshots. I watched Linda's face drain of what little color remained as he approached the bench, his presence filling the space with an energy that made the air itself feel electric. Judge Martinez raised an eyebrow but gestured for him to continue. "Your Honor, I'm David Chun, attorney for the Social Security Administration's Office of Inspector General." He set his briefcase down with a decisive click that seemed to reverberate through my bones. "We've been investigating Ms. Linda Harrison for suspected benefit fraud for the past 6 months. The words hit me like a physical blow. Benefit fraud. I felt the courtroom tilt around me, the wooden pews and fluorescent lights blurring together as the reality of what he was saying sank in. This wasn't just about money anymore, this was about crime. Linda's voice came out as a strangled whisper. "I don't understand what you're implying." Attorney Chin opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder that dwarfed Linda's pathetic single-page invoice. "Ms. Harrison, you've been collecting Social Security survivor benefits on behalf of your niece for 10 years. The problem is, according to our investigation, Kate Harrison moved out of your home and became financially independent when she turned 18. That was 3 years ago." My heart stopped. 3 years. I thought back to my 18th birthday, to the fight we'd had when I told Linda I was moving into the dorms at community college. She'd screamed at me about being ungrateful, about abandoning family, but she'd never mentioned anything about benefits ending. "You continued to collect $1,200 per month in benefits for 3 additional years, Chin continued, his voice cutting through the courtroom like a scalpel. "Benefits that were supposed to stop the moment Kate was no longer in your care. That's $43,200 in fraudulent claims." The math hit me like a sledgehammer. $43,000. Money she'd stolen not just from the government, but from me, money that could have helped me pay for college, for textbooks, for the ramen noodles I'd lived on for months, because I couldn't afford anything else. Judge Martinez leaned forward, his expression thunderous. "Ms. Linda Harrison, is this true?" Linda's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I could see her mind racing, searching for an explanation that would make this all go away. But there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide from the paper trail that Chin was methodically laying out on the judge's bench. Kate was still family. I was still helping her with expenses sometimes. I thought. "You thought wrong," Judge Martinez interrupted, his voice sharp enough to shatter glass. "Mr. Chin, what else do you have?" Chin pulled out another set of documents, and I watched Linda's face crumble completely. Bank records showing that Ms. Harrison used the fraudulently obtained benefits to pay for a luxury cruise to the Caribbean, a new car, and extensive home renovations. None of these expenses were related to Kate's care or well-being. The cruise. I remembered Linda posting photos on Facebook last year, her smiling on a white sand beach, cocktail in hand, caption reading, "Finally treating myself." I'd felt a stab of jealousy at the time, wondering how she could afford such luxuries while I was working 2 part-time jobs just to make rent. Now I knew. She'd paid for that vacation with my money. Furthermore, Chin continued, we have evidence that Ms. Harrison actively concealed Kate's change of address from the Social Security Administration. She continued to use Kate's name and Social Security number to collect benefits, while knowing full well that Kate was no longer eligible. The courtroom felt like it was closing in around me. I could hear my own breathing, sharp and shallow, could smell the fear sweat that was now pouring off Linda in waves. This wasn't just about the $50,000 anymore. This was about 18 years of lies, manipulation, and theft. Judge Martinez set down the documents and fixed Linda with a stare that could have melted steel. Ms. Harrison, you came into my courtroom today demanding $50,000 from your niece for raising her. But according to this evidence, not only were you already compensated for her care to the tune of nearly $200,000, you also defrauded the government out of an additional $43,000 after she left your home. Linda's legs gave out. She collapsed into the chair behind her, her face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking with what might have been sobs or might have been rage. I couldn't tell anymore. The woman who had raised me, who had tucked me in at night and helped me with homework and taught me how to drive, was a stranger. Your Honor, Chin said, his voice cutting through Linda's breakdown, the Office of Inspector General is prepared to file criminal charges against Ms. Harrison for Social Security fraud. We're also seeking full restitution of the fraudulently obtained benefits, plus penalties and interest. Criminal charges. The words echoed in my head like a death knell. I thought about visiting Linda in prison, about explaining to people why my aunt was behind bars, about the shame that would follow our family name for years to come. But then I thought about the ramen noodles, about the nights I'd gone to bed hungry because I couldn't afford groceries, about the textbooks I'd had to steal from a library because I couldn't buy them. I thought about the money that was rightfully mine, money that could have changed my entire life, sitting in Linda's bank account while she lived in luxury. Judge Martinez turned to me, his expression softening slightly. Ms. Kate Harrison, I imagine this is quite a shock. I stood on trembling legs, my voice barely audible. Your Honor, I had no idea about any of it. I thought she was just being generous, taking care of me out of love. I'm sure you did. He looked back at Linda, who was still hunched over in her chair. Ms. Linda Harrison, stand up. Linda rose slowly, her face streaked with tears and mascara. She looked older somehow, smaller, as if the weight of her crimes had physically diminished her. I'm dismissing your claim for $50,000, Judge Martinez said, his voice ringing with finality. Furthermore, I'm ordering you to pay immediate restitution to Ms. Kate Harrison in the amount of $43,200, the benefits you fraudulently collected after she left your care. Linda's face went white. Your Honor, I don't have that kind of money. The cruise, the car payments. That's not my problem. The judge cut her off. You'll have 30 days to arrange payment, or we'll begin asset seizure proceedings. Mr. Chin, please coordinate with my clerk regarding the criminal referral. Chin nodded, already making notes in his legal pad. Of course, Your Honor. I felt like I was floating, like this was all happening to someone else. $43,000. It wasn't everything she'd stolen from me, but it was something. It was acknowledgement that what she'd done was wrong, that I deserved better. Judge Martinez was about to bring down his gavel when Linda suddenly straightened up, her tear-streaked face twisting into something ugly and desperate. You want to know the truth? She screamed, her voice echoing off the courtroom walls. You want to know why I kept that money? The entire room went silent. Even Chin stopped writing, his pen frozen halfway through a word. Linda turned to face me, her eyes blazing with a fury I'd never seen before. Because your precious mother was a drug addict, Kate. She died high as a kite, crashed her car into a tree because she was too stoned to see straight. And you know what she left you? Nothing. Not a penny. Not even a life insurance policy. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs, felt the courtroom spin around me as 18 years of carefully constructed memories crumbled to dust. I saved you from foster care, Linda continued, her voice rising to a shriek. I gave you a home, a family, a chance at a normal life. And this is how you repay me? By dragging me into court, by destroying everything I've worked for. Judge Martinez was banging his gavel, shouting for order, but Linda wasn't done. You want that money so badly? Fine. Take it. But don't you ever forget that without me, you would have been just another statistic, just another broken kid in the system. I may have taken some money, but I saved your life. She grabbed her purse and stormed toward the exit, but before she could reach the doors, they swung open again. A woman in a police uniform stepped inside, her hand resting on her radio. Behind her stood another figure, someone I recognized but couldn't quite place, someone whose presence made Linda stop dead in her tracks. Linda Harrison, the officer called out. You're under arrest for Social Security fraud and identity theft. But it wasn't the arrest that made my blood run cold. It was the look of absolute terror on Linda's face as she stared at the person standing behind the officer. A person who looked exactly like my mother. The woman stepped into the courtroom light, and my world shattered completely. She had my mother's dark hair, my mother's green eyes, my mother's delicate hands that I remembered braiding my hair when I was small. But this woman was older, weathered by years I thought she'd never live to see. Hello, Linda, she said, her voice carrying the same soft cadence that used to sing me lullabies. Hello, Katie. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Couldn't process what I was seeing. The courtroom around me faded to white noise as I stared at the impossible figure standing in the doorway. My mother. My dead mother. The woman I'd grieved for 18 years, whose grave I'd visited every year on her birthday, whose memory had shaped every decision I'd ever made. No, Linda whispered, backing away from the doors like she'd seen a ghost. Which I supposed she had. No, no, no. You're supposed to be dead. You died in that car crash. I saw the body. I identified the body. My mother, because it was her, it was really her, I could feel it in my bones, stepped further into the courtroom. She moved carefully, like someone who'd been hurt and learned to be cautious, but her eyes never left my face. You identified Sarah Mitchell, she said quietly. My friend. The woman who was driving my car because I was too sick to drive myself to rehab. The woman who died because she was trying to help me get clean. The officer moved to handcuff Linda, but Judge Martinez held up a hand. Wait. I think we all need to hear this. My mother nodded gratefully and took another step toward me. I wanted to run to her, to throw myself into her arms like I was 8 years old again, but my legs wouldn't move. 18 years of grief and anger and abandonment had turned to stone in my chest. Katie, baby, I know this is impossible to understand, she said, her voice breaking on my name. I was in rehab when the accident happened. Linda knew where I was. She's the one who drove me there. But when Sarah died in my car, wearing my jacket, carrying my purse, Linda saw an opportunity. I found my voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. An opportunity for what? Linda was crying now, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. She was going to take you away from me, she choked out. She was getting clean, getting her life together. She was going to come back and take you, and I couldn't let that happen. You were mine. You were supposed to be mine. The pieces clicked together in my mind like a puzzle I'd been trying to solve my entire life. You told everyone she was dead. You let me believe my mother was dead, so you could keep me. And the Social Security benefits. Survivor benefits for an orphan child, Attorney Chin said grimly. Much more money than temporary guardianship assistance would have provided. My mother's face crumpled. I tried to contact you so many times over the years. But Linda had moved, changed addresses, changed phone numbers. Every time I got close to finding you, she'd disappear again. It wasn't until you turned 18 and started using social media that I was able to track you down. You've been looking for me? The words came out strangled, barely human. Every single day for 18 years. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands, showing me a screen full of saved searches. My name, variations of my name, the town where Linda lived, my school district. I hired private investigators. I contacted the police. But Linda had legal guardianship, and as far as the system was concerned, I was dead. Judge Martinez leaned forward, his expression grave. MS. Sarah Harrison. I kept my married name. My mother's voice was stronger now, more confident. Your Honor, I've been working with the Social Security Administration for months to uncover this fraud. When I learned that Linda was still collecting benefits in Katie's name, I knew I had to act. You're the one who tipped off the investigation, I realized. She nodded. I couldn't let her keep stealing from you. You're my daughter. Everything I've done for the past 18 years has been about finding you, about making this right. Linda suddenly lunged forward, her face twisted with rage and desperation. She's lying. She's a drug addict, a criminal. I saved Katie from her. I gave her a good life. By stealing her inheritance, my mother shot back, her voice sharp with 18 years of suppressed anger. By letting her believe I was dead? By making her feel guilty for every kindness you showed her while you were profiting off her tragedy. What inheritance? I asked, my voice barely audible. My mother turned back to me, her expression softening. Your father had a life insurance policy, baby. A big one. When he died, it was supposed to go into a trust for you, to be managed by your guardian until you turned 21. Linda was supposed to use it for your care and education, and then turn over the remainder to you. The courtroom was spinning again. How much? $300,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $300,000. Enough to pay for college, to buy a house, to start a life. Money that should have been mine, money that Linda had hidden from me for my entire life. Where is it now? Judge Martinez asked, his voice deadly quiet. Linda's face went gray. I used it. For Katie's care. For expenses. For a cruise to the Caribbean. Attorney Chin corrected. For a new BMW. For a kitchen renovation that cost $40,000. We have all the records, Ms. Harrison. Every fraudulent transaction. My mother stepped closer to me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, the same vanilla scent I remembered from childhood. Katie, I know you have no reason to trust me. I know I failed you by getting sick, by not being strong enough to fight Linda when it mattered. But I'm here now. I'm clean. I have been for 15 years. I have a job, a home, a life that I've built around the hope of finding you again. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the truth written in every line of her face. The years of searching, of grief, of rebuilding herself from nothing. She wasn't the broken woman who'd needed rehab 18 years ago. She was someone new, someone who'd fought her way back from the dead for me. I don't understand, I whispered. If you've been clean for 15 years, why didn't you try harder to find me? Why didn't you go to the police, to the courts? Her face crumpled. I did, baby. I tried everything. But Linda had death certificates, had legal guardianship papers. As far as the system was concerned, Sarah Harrison died in a car crash in 2006. I had to rebuild my entire identity, get new social security cards, new driver's licenses. It took years just to prove I was alive. And by then, Katie was almost an adult, Attorney Chin added. The courts are reluctant to disrupt stable guardianship arrangements, especially when the child is thriving academically and socially. I thought about my childhood with Linda, the birthday parties, the school plays, the bedtime stories. Had any of it been real? Or had it all been an elaborate performance, funded by money that was rightfully mine? Ms. Linda Harrison, Judge Martinez said, his voice cutting through my spiraling thoughts. You are under arrest for Social Security fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement of a minor's trust fund. The total amount of your theft appears to exceed $400,000. $400,000. The number was so large it didn't feel real. Linda collapsed completely then, her sobs echoing off the courtroom walls as the officer moved to handcuff her. "Katie, please," she begged, looking at me with desperate eyes. "I loved you. I raised you. Doesn't that count for something?" I stared at her. This woman who had been my world for 18 years, who had shaped me into the person I was today. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to remember the good times and forget the lies. But then I thought about my mother, spending 18 years believing her daughter was lost to her forever. I thought about the money that could have changed my life, the opportunities I'd missed because I couldn't afford them. "You didn't love me," I said quietly. "You loved owning me. There's a difference." The officer led Linda away, her cries fading as the courtroom doors closed behind them. Judge Martinez was saying something about restitution and criminal proceedings, but I couldn't focus on his words. All I could see was my mother, standing 3 feet away from me, tears streaming down her face. "Katie," she whispered, "can you ever forgive me? For getting sick, for not being strong enough to protect you from her." I looked at this woman who had given me life, who had fought her way back from addiction and death to find me again. She wasn't perfect. She'd made mistakes, terrible ones that had cost us both 18 years. But she was here now, and she was real, and she was mine. I took a step toward her, then another, until I was close enough to touch her face. Her skin was warm, lined with years I'd missed, but unmistakably real. "Mom," I whispered. She nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "Yes, baby. I'm here. I'm finally here." I fell into her arms then, 18 years of grief and anger and longing pouring out of me in great, heaving sobs. She held me tight, her hand stroking my hair the way she used to when I was small, whispering apologies and promises and all the words we'd missed saying to each other. "I'm so sorry," she kept repeating. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I'm so sorry I let her take you from me. You're here now," I managed between sobs. "You came back. You found me." We stood there in the empty courtroom, holding each other as if we could make up for 18 lost years through sheer force of will. Judge Martinez had quietly left, along with Attorney Chun and the court reporter. It was just us now, mother and daughter, finally reunited. "What happens now?" Asked when I could finally speak again. My mother pulled back to look at me, her hands framing my face. "Now we get to know each other again. We get to be a family. And we make sure Linda pays for what she did to us." I nodded, feeling something like hope blooming in my chest for the first time in years. "I'd like that." She smiled then, the same smile I remembered from childhood, the one that made everything feel safe and possible. "Come on, baby. Let's go home." As we walked out of the courthouse together, I realized that for the first time in 18 years, I actually had a home to go to. Not a place where I was tolerated or managed or used, but a place where I was wanted, where I belonged. The sun was shining as we stepped outside, warm on my face after the cold fluorescent lights of a courtroom. My mother's hand was warm in mine, real and solid and finally here. Linda had taken 18 years from us, had stolen my inheritance and my mother's identity and nearly destroyed both our lives. But she hadn't won. Love had won. Truth had won. Family, real family, had won. And as we walked toward my mother's car, toward whatever came next, I knew that no amount of money could ever be worth as much as this moment. This second chance. This miracle of finding each other again. The invoice Linda had presented to the court was still crumpled on the courthouse steps, blown there by the wind. $50,000 for raising me, she demanded. But she'd never understood the real cost of what she'd done. She'd stolen more than money. She'd stolen time, love, truth, family. But time had a way of revealing everything, and love had a way of surviving even the deepest betrayals. As my mother and I drove away from the courthouse toward a future we'd build together, I finally understood what it meant to be truly rich. I had my mother back. Everything else was just details.